The following is a production of Stevenson Media. Want to tip the host? Just scan the QR code or click the link in the description. Get a free Houston Sports State of the Union podcast t-shirt with a donation of $50 or more.
This is the Houston Sports State of the Union podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, the president of Houston Sports Nation, Nick Stevenson.
My goodness, thank you so much. Please be seated. My fellow Houstonians, welcome to this Houston Sports State of the Union address for the week of September the 15th. I am the self-appointed president of Houston Sports Nation, Nick Stevenson. As always, there's 1,000 different things you could be doing this afternoon. You chose to spend a little bit of time with me, and I appreciate it. On today's show, the Texans defeat the Chicago Bears with a brilliant defensive effort. However, fans still have much to be desired when it comes to this team's offense. I will break down the matchup for tomorrow with the Minnesota Vikings, and I'll give you my keys to a Houston Texans victory. The Astros are on the precipice of winning the AL West for the 7th time. If they handle their business the way that they should, then I imagine they will be playing to eliminate the Mariners once we get to that series opener on Monday. Also, I will demonstrate how slow the Houston Rockets news cycle has been when I highlight my latest article from the Dream Shake. And as always, I would love to give away some free swag if you want to play either Houston Sports Trivia. Also, I'm going to give you guys an opportunity to win some Houston Sports State of the Union podcast swag if you can correctly guess the score of the Minnesota Vikings versus the Houston Texans tomorrow. So that's what our show is going to be about. Once again, I appreciate you guys so much for joining me. Really quick, let me remind you of the ways that you can continue to support this show. One of them you're doing already. You're watching, you're listening. Hopefully by now you are clicking share, sharing with your friends, your family, your enemies, your frenemies, anybody who enjoys Houston sports. Go ahead and let them know about the Houston Sports State of the Union podcast. And remember to remind them to follow, like, subscribe wherever they get their podcast fix. The audio for this show will be available, give or take, about an hour to 45 minutes after this live stream is done. And that is the number one way you can support this show, is continue to watch, continue to listen, and please continue to share. If you're interested in contributing monetarily, if you're watching the video, I have got a QR code right here in the corner. That QR code leads to my tip jar. If you are not watching a video, there is a link in the description that you are either of the video you're watching or the audio that you're listening to. There is a link also to the tip jar in that description. If you guys leave me anything, it's much appreciated. It goes back into the show to continue bringing you guys great content. A donation of $50 or more will get you a Houston Sports State of the Union podcast t-shirt, cap, bag, whatever you want with the logo on it. I'll make sure you get it. Make sure you take a screenshot of that $50 donation, because those donations are anonymous. And make sure you send it to me so I know who it is and I can make sure that you get your free swag. Another way to support me, there are some affiliate links that will be in the description of this video. They're not there currently. But for Houston Sports fan gear, I'm going to switch it up. It's starting to get late in the year, so I want to get the hoodies and the jackets and stuff in there. So I'm going to add some Houston Sports fan gear links. They'll be my Amazon affiliate links. And also you will see links to the equipment that I am using to bring you this show. Anytime you purchase anything with my Amazon link, I will get some change from that. And it's another way to support the show financially. And then once again, I do have sponsorship spots available for the Houston Sports State of the Union podcast, and also for the Twin Toros podcast, which, if you're not familiar, that is a podcast I recently started with my good friend Ruben Calavillo. And we have some great news about that show. First of all, I want to thank all of you who have been watching the Twin Toros, listening to the Twin Toros. Our first 3 episodes have over 4,000 views, and we're getting plenty of likes and interaction with the people who enjoy that show. So I have to thank all of you so much. Because of those supporters, our show will be moving to the ESPN Houston YouTube channel next week, starting on Tuesday. And we will drop a show every Tuesday of the NFL season to recap the game of the most recent game that week that the Houston Texans have played. So thank you guys so much for all of that support. Thank you for being here today. I appreciate it so much. let's hop into it. Like I said, whenever you guys show up, hop in the chat. I want to see your score predictions for tomorrow's game. In the meantime, let's get started with the state of the Houston Texans. All right. The Houston Texans are going to play the Minnesota Vikings in Minnesota. The Minnesota Vikings are a team that the Houston Texans have never beat, and they are going to try to be changing that on Sunday. And I think they have a good opportunity to, although there will be some challenges in this game. Against the Chicago Bears last week, I had predicted a score. I think I was predicting 28-21. It was not that big of a scoring game. Defense really won the day for the Houston Texans as they were able to get to Caleb Williams 7 times. He dropped back 40 plus times and he was pressured 36 of them. The defense balled out, plain and simple. They got 2 interceptions, should have been 3. I was not a fan of the holding call on 2020 that negated Kamari Lassiter's first interception. However, the Houston Texans had a very good defensive showing in their first primetime game in over 5 years, or in 5 years since 2019. However, as I stated in the open, the offense still is leaving fans with much to be desired. With all the anticipation and expectation we set on this team after acquiring Stephon Diggs, Joe Mixon, already having Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Dalton Schultz, Brevin Jordan, all of the offensive weapons that this team has, we haven't quite seen this offense click the way we all hoped. To some of the chagrin of not just Houston Texans fans, but some of the national media who have been putting all the hype on the Houston Texans. Now, the last power ranking I saw still had them somewhere in between 5 and even as high as 2 I saw on Bleacher Report. And I think that's mostly because of what they've shown defensively. But some people have started to criticize Bobby Slowick already. I think it's a little too soon for that. Let's keep in mind, there's been a lot of not great offense in the first 2 weeks of the season. The defenses have clearly been ahead of the offenses. I think that has a lot to do with how the off seasons look so much different now with the extended season and with less preseason games. And these teams are not being as physical, as active in those preseason, not only the games, but even in the practices. So I think it's to be expected that this offense is going to take a little while to catch its stride. I think this week versus the Minnesota Vikings, they're going to need to catch their stride because Brian Flores has this defense balling out. Say what you want about Brian Flores as a head coach, as a quarterback, a destroyer of quarterbacks, if you will. He's a damn good defensive coach, and he's got this defense for the Vikings balling out. They beat the San Francisco 49ers last week. As we all know, the San Francisco 49ers, there's a lot of connection between that organization and the Houston Texans. And so Texans fans really have a vested interest in watching that matchup, which I watched very closely because of the similarities between those two teams. This defense won the day against the 49ers. They had 6 sacks, a fumble recovered, and an interception of Brock Purdy. Now, something that my cohort of the Twin Toros brought up that I hadn't put in my notes, but it was a very good point. Despite the fact that the defense balled out and they even got a special teams punt block for the Vikings, the 49ers were still able to put up 300 plus yards through the air and 100 yards on the ground. So if the Texans offense is moving and operating the way that we believe it should, they should still be able to put up some yards. And really what made the difference for the Minnesota Vikings versus the 49ers is that the 49ers turned the ball over. So I have several keys to the game that I believe are going to be very crucial for the Texans to not lose to the Vikings. One of them is make sure that you protect the ball. If you watch that game versus the 49ers did everything right offensively, except for take care of the ball. So it's going to be extremely crucial that the Texans do that. What's going to be the best way that they do that? Well, number one, they need to protect CJ Stroud better than they have been protecting him because Patrick Jones, Brian Cashman, former Houston Texan, Andrew Van Ginkel, they had themselves a day against the 49ers. Like I said, the real matchup, I know there's a lot of matchups we're looking forward to seeing. We got CJ Stroud versus, I'm doing the name thing again. Okay, it's going to come to me. The quarterback that's playing for the Vikings. My goodness. Anyways, I keep wanting to say Andy Dalton, and that's not his name. But either way, we have CJ Stroud matchup. We have the matchup of Derek Stingley Jr. P. Scott says Texans by infinity billion. Hey, P. Scott, Sam Darnold, thank you very much. This happens once a show. I totally flame out on somebody's name. Sam Darnold, who is seemingly in the first 2 weeks of this season, at least, revitalized his career. He's one of the quarterbacks that are just having an outrageous beginning to this season. We've got Derek Carr. We've got Baker Mayfield. I don't know if all of these guys are going to regress to the mean, but I believe at least a few of them will. My bet is on Sam Darnold, and I hope it starts this week. But yeah, that's an interesting matchup to look at. You've got Stingley versus Jefferson. But at the end of the day, when you look at the tail of the tape, the real story in this game is going to be Bobby Slowick versus Brian Flores. Who's going to win? Who's going to make the most adjustments in game? Who's going to be able to score on both of these really tough defenses? That's going to be the key. And I think that there's a couple of players for the Houston Texans that are going to need to show up because I don't think that the Minnesota Vikings are a pushover at all. We're definitely making a step up in competition from our first two games. I believe the Colts should have been an easier win than we got. I thought the Bears should have been an easier win than we got, although you have to give the Bears defense a lot of credit. They have a really good front seven, really good secondary, and they're extremely well coached. And if Eberflus knows anything, it's not how to challenge calls correctly, and it's definitely nothing on the offensive end. Somehow they were not able to adjust to the fact that DeMeco Ryans and this defense had blitzed more than they had in the entire time that DeMeco Ryans had been a coach, not just for the Texans, but I believe for the 49ers as a defensive coordinator as well. So say what you will. I think the real matchup is the battle of the coaches, and specifically the offensive coordinator of the Texans versus the defensive coordinator of the Vikings. I want to really quick go over the injury report because that's pretty important. And what we're looking at right now is a doubtful Joe Mixon. Dameon Pierce is obviously out with the hamstring. Everyone else is either questionable or they were full participators in practice, and so they should be expected to play. I know Nico Collins had a foot heel type thing going on. Kamari Lassiter was dealing with a hip, I believe. All of those unspecified, I expect to play. The questionables, I'm assuming they will be game time decisions and Juice Scruggs, and MJ Stewart. I would love to have Juice back because, once again, I'm a fan of Jarrett Patterson and everything he did for this team last season, but he struggled. The offensive line struggled in general, and they have been struggling in general, especially in the pass protection. And we've discussed exhaustingly about how they haven't played together, not one single game. Well, they finally got to play all together in week one, and by the time we got to week two, Juice Scruggs was already out. And so this streak of our starting offensive line playing together is currently at one game. Hopefully we can get at least two in a row, as once again, the competition, there's a step up in the competition for sure. So the Houston Texans have some work to do. Joe Mixon is not going to be playing. Dameon Pierce is not going to be playing. That means the player who needs to step up the most, he shoots right to the top of the list, is obviously Cam Akers. Now, I discussed this many times during the preseason about how I wanted to see Cam Akers run with the ones because, number one, Joe Mixon was not playing in the preseason. Dameon Pierce was kind of playing in the preseason, not really accomplishing anything. And someone asked me, hey, if you were in the press conference, what would you want to ask DeMeco Ryans? And I said, the first thing I would want to ask is, don't you at least want to see how Cam Akers looks running with the ones? Obviously, he did enough in practice to make this team. So I believe that that's not going to be an issue because we did see him run the ball last week in the fourth quarter after Joe Mixon was out, thanks to a hip drop tackle that is the reason that he is doubtful for this game in the first place. We'll get into that in a little bit. But Cam Akers looked really good running the ball just as he had in the preseason, all the way up until he fumbled in the red zone. And that is, once again, one of the keys to this game. They're going to have to protect the ball. Now, Cam Akers is not of the build of a Joe Mixon. He's not the build of a Dameon Pierce. I don't think that Bobby Slowick is going to want to hand him the ball 30 times. That's going to put more pressure on this passing game, CJ Stroud, this offensive line to protect CJ Stroud. It's going to put more pressure on them to start to perform in the way that we thought that they would when they put all of this talent together. But to me, the microscope this week is going to be on Cam Akers. Can you continue to productively run the ball? Because that's going to keep Justin Jefferson, who might arguably be the best wide receiver in football right now and is on his way to being an all-time great. Although I have to say, even though he had 133 yards against the San Francisco 49ers, I have to give them credit because 97 of that was on one play. And while that can't happen, we saw that happen to the Texans in week 1. And I'm a little bit concerned about that happening again. That's why, but I have to give them credit because other than that 97-yard touchdown, the 49ers did a pretty good job of limiting Justin Jefferson. The Texans are going to have to find a way to do the same. That is why my second player on this list of people who need to step up is going to be Jimmy Ward. One of the safeties for the 49ers got caught watching the backfield and then jumping the wrong route. And that's how he was burned for the 97-yard touchdown by Justin Jefferson. Jimmy Ward can't afford to do that. So I'm definitely looking for him to step up. I'm hoping that we see Kalen Bullock playing more of that center field role and making sure that nothing gets past him because Jimmy Ward's play, not just this season, but Jimmy Ward's play since he's been a Houston Texan is a little bit concerning to me. The third player, or I should say group of players that I have on this list of people who need to step up is the entire offensive line. Whether it's Juice Scruggs, Patterson, whether they bring in, I'm doing the name thing, not Kendrick Brooks. All right, hold on a second. Kendrick Green. We got Kenyon Green and Kendrick Green. Whether they bring in whoever's going to be playing center, if they're going to move, I don't know. I guess it's going to depend on if Scruggs is ready to go. I'm hoping that he'll be ready to go. I'm hoping we'll get to see our supposed starting offensive line again together for the second time. But whoever is there, they're going to have to get it together against his front seven. And you also can't forget Jonathan Grenard, as well as Blake Cashman, are both on the other side of this, on the other side of the line now, and they probably want to prove a point to the Houston Texans. Anytime we see players come back and play their old team, the Texans feel like they upgraded both of those positions with Danielle Hunter and with Azeez Al-Shaair. I happen to agree with them. If I were D'Amico Ryans and I were Nick Caserio, I would consider Danielle Hunter and Azeez Al-Shaair upgrades over Jonathan Grenard and Blake Cashman. But I will say Blake Cashman balled out last week. And you better believe he's coming here and he wants to ball out. Or I'm sorry, they'll be in Minnesota. But you better believe he wants to ball out against the Houston Texans because the Houston Texans let him go. So this offensive line is definitely going to have to be on their A game. Not just running the ball, not just in pass protection, but hopefully we get a performance where they are performing well in both of those things, because I think that's going to be important if the Texans want to move to 3-0. My fourth player that I have that needs to step up is Derek Stingley Jr. Once again, my co-host brought up a very good point, and I read this article somewhere. I can't remember where now. I was saying initially that I thought Derek Stingley Jr. should follow Justin Jefferson around, but I've kind of changed my mind on that. Ruben brought up the idea that perhaps you put Kamari Lassiter on Justin Jefferson, you double team him with a safety, preferably Kalen Bullock, hopefully not Jimmy Ward, definitely not Jalen Petrie. I love Jalen Petrie. I love the role he plays for this team. I do not want to see him in coverage versus Justin Jefferson. Put him down on the line, let him stop the run, let him blitz the quarterback. let him be a de facto extra linebacker, if you will. But I do not want to see him. I don't want to see anybody on the Texans chasing Justin Jefferson in the end zone. But definitely you're asking for trouble if you're going to put, in my opinion, Jimmy Ward or Jalen Petrie on him. So you use Kamari Lassiter, you use Kalen Bullock, you double team Justin Jefferson, and now you're putting Stingley on either your second or your third wide receiver, and say, hey, go beat this guy, because you're not going to beat us with Justin Jefferson, and we're going to put the best cornerback that we have on our team on your second and or third guy. See what you can do with that. I think that's a good idea. The Texans didn't move Stingley around a whole lot last season until towards the end of the year, so it'll be interesting to see. It's going to be a hell of a matchup. I personally, the fan in me would love to see Derek Stingley Jr. line up across from Justin Jefferson and say, hey, man, may the best man win. When you're talking about Justin Jefferson, as great as he is, that's a little bit scary. Especially one of the reasons I have Derek Stingley on this list of player who needs to step up is he missed several tackles last week. He did not tackle very well. Definitely not as well as he did in week 1. He missed a few in this game. So you do that against Justin Jefferson, and the Vikings are going to be hanging up points on the board in a hurry. So I'm hopeful that the Texans defense, although once again, this is a step up in competition, and it doesn't seem like it should be based on the way some of these teams were viewed in the preseason. I think people had a lot of expectations for Anthony Richardson and the receiving core that he has. There's obviously been a lot of expectation for Caleb Williams and the plethora of receivers he has, although Keenan Allen was injured in that game. But they didn't look good against this Texans defense, and I think you do have to give the Texans defense some credit for that. Now, if the Texans can get the offense together and continue to play strong, swarming, disciplined defense, I'm going to predict that they win this game 28-24. I don't think they're going to be able to completely shut down Justin Jefferson. If you can hold him to one touchdown, and hopefully if it's over 100 yards, it's not by a lot. He's not doing a 150 or a damn near 200-yard game. You hold him somewhere between 80 to 100, one touchdown. I think the Houston Texans would take that in a heartbeat. You got to be able to stop the running game. Aaron Jones had a really good running game versus the San Francisco 49ers. I believe they rushed for almost 200 yards, if not 200 yards. So this sounds very cliche, but the keys to the game, as I said, protect the quarterback, protect the ball, keep the offense, the Vikings offense, on the sideline by being able to run the ball. That's probably going to be the key to the game in like almost every game. I know that. It sounds really cliche, but it's true. It's what the Texans are going to have to do, and they have a real opportunity here. The rest of the division is 0-2. They have a chance to go 3-0. None of the games that the competition in the AFC South are playing are gimmies. The closest thing to it might be the Colts versus the Bears. But you have two quarterbacks in that game that are really, really struggling, in Anthony Richardson and Caleb Williams. So there's no telling what could happen in that game. The Jags play the Bills. I'm going to need your Bills to hook a brother up, Mr. P. Scott, in a heartbeat. And then I can't remember who the Titans are playing, but they're going to lose. I don't even care. I think they're playing the Bucks. I could be wrong. But yeah, I'm the Texans have a real opportunity here, especially with the Ravens going 0-2. You know that the Kansas City Chiefs are going to keep dominating their schedule more than likely. So you want to give yourself a real shot here to at least keep pace with the Chiefs, maybe stay ahead of the Ravens, who I believe are going to improve. I don't see the Pittsburgh Steelers going undefeated this season. Obviously, I don't think they're going to win that division. Eventually, I think the Ravens will get it together and take care of that division. But you have a real opportunity here to go 3-0, and then you get another in-division game in week 4 against the Jaguars. And if you can win that game and the Minnesota game and get to 4-0, now you're cooking with grease. And hopefully your defense and your offense is humming and clicking by the time week 5 comes around and the Buffalo Bills come to town, hopefully along with P. Scott, so we can make ourselves a little friendly wager on that game. But the Texans have a real shot here to put themselves in a position that they've not been in a long time. When I look at the landscape of the NFL and where the Texans belong in the echelon of these other teams, like I said, I saw some of the power rankings having them anywhere between 2 and 5. It's hard for me to put them there right now when the offense just isn't clicking. But if they can get that thing humming and this defense can continue to be dominant the way it has been, then all of the hype that we've had about this team in the offseason is going to be justified. But you got some tough games at the end of the schedule. So it's going to behoove them to take care of business in this early part of the schedule. I'm not saying the Vikings are a pushover, but it's a game you should win. I believe Vegas has us favored by 2, which on the road, I mean, that's essentially a 3-4 point spread. So I think they have a real opportunity here, and I hope they take advantage of it. But I'm curious about you guys, if you're in the chat, or if you want to put it in the comments later, because I will be giving away some free swag to anybody who correctly guesses the score of the Minnesota Vikings versus Houston Texans game. I'd like to know, what do you guys think? What is your score prediction? Like I said, I've got 28-24 Texans. I'm hopeful that this offense is finally going to kick it into gear. You've got Stephon Diggs with some incentive to put up a good game here going against his former team. And there's a lot of former teammates or former members of each team that are going to be in this game. You got Danielle Hunter going up against the Vikings for the first time. He's been fantastic in his first 2 games. Look, man, the front 7 on this defense is great. The first game, the secondary, at least the safeties, were a little bit shaky, namely Jimmy Ward. I thought the defense really, really balled out on Sunday Night Football. If the Texans can get this offense humming, man, they're going to be super scary. So I'm looking forward to the game. I'm going to get up early in the morning. I'm going to throw some fajitas on the grill. And I'm just going to enjoy my day off. It's the first time since my schedule has changed that I get back-to-back weekends off. That means back-to-back, being able to relax with my family, watch the games, watch some football. I'm really super excited about that. If you guys are interested, my brother is going to be out at the Food Zone Grand Texas in New Caney. He will be DJing and emceeing the Texans versus the Vikings game. I believe he's going to be raffling off some Texans tickets as well. So if you don't mind, listen, man, I live here in southeast side of town. It's about a 45-minute drive to the Food Zone, but I'm telling you guys, it's well worth it. It is a super cool place. Check out my man Vic over at Chicken Heads. He's got Houston hot chicken, and it's fire, bro. I'm not gonna lie. He hooked us up when we went to the Canelo fight just last week, and he's a really good dude. Really excellent food, fresh. Customer service is on point. So you guys go out to the Food Zone Grand Texas if you're looking for a place to check out the game. I don't know what the weather's gonna be like, and I don't know, because we were there at nighttime, so I don't know what they do during the day to keep it cool out there. But it's definitely family-friendly environment, great food, good affordable prices on food and beverages. They got alcoholic beverages out there, everything you can need to enjoy the game. So you guys go check that out. All right, guys, let's move on to the state of the Houston Astros. All right. Not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. The Astros are very close to being able to close out the Mariners and win the AL West for the 7th time since they've been in the American League. If they handle everything the way they should, like I said in the open, by the time we get to the Mariners on Monday, you should be closing them out and claiming this division within the first 1 or 2 games of that series. Excuse me. Yeah, so last week, my man CJ came in and we were debating, as it's looking very much so like the Astros, one of those teams. I just totally did that thing that parents do when they call every single one of their children's name before they get to the kid they're actually talking to. Let me tell you, man, getting old sucks. Anyway, the Houston Astros, I think it's pretty safe to assume they're going to be winning the division and in the playoffs. Now, the odds of them catching up with the Cleveland Guardians are pretty much zero. They would basically have to win out the last 8 games of the season, and the Guardians would pretty much have to lose out their last 7 or 8 games, which I don't think is going to happen. So more than likely, what's going to happen is the Astros will be winning the division and playing a 3-game wild card series. And I don't know who they'll be playing against, but regardless of that, it doesn't really matter. If the Astros handle their business and do the thing they're supposed to do, it doesn't matter who they play. They should win. Now, but last week, CJ called in and we had a debate about who was going to be in the starting rotation of the Astros for the playoffs. Whether it was a 3-game series, 5-game series, 7-game series. CJ said at the time that he did not want to put Yusei Kikuchi in the playoff lineup rotation because we don't know what he's going to do in the playoffs. Well, every player has to have their first run in the playoffs. And I'm going to be completely honest with you. I don't know if Kikuchi's pitched in the postseason before or not. I imagine that he probably has because Toronto has been in the postseason over the last several years. So I imagine he probably has some postseason experience, but I did not look that up before I started the show, so I do apologize. But irregardless, even if he hasn't, you cannot judge the fact that he either has minimal postseason experience or maybe he has bad postseason experience, because since he's been with the Houston Astros, he's been lights out. And the Astros haven't lost a game. So and I said so last week, it's kind of absurd to think that the Astros would make the trade that they made to get him when the odds, nobody knows. It's not for sure that he's coming back next season. You traded for him this year so that he could pitch you into the playoffs. So the Astros are going to be playing a 3-game series. That we know. There's no way they're catching up with Cleveland. If by some miracle they do, we'll discuss that when it happens. But they're going to be playing a 3-game series. And so for me, I think it's simple what rotation you should go with. Game 1 has got to be Framber Valdez. Game 2, whether you win or lose, Game 1 needs to be Yusei Kikuchi. And then in Game 3, I say you start Brown and or Blanco. And if either of them struggle early, you bring in the one that you didn't start. So you either start Brown, bring in Blanco if he struggles, or start Blanco, bring in Brown if he struggles. And a third indecisive game. But Nick, what about Justin Verlander? I don't want Justin Verlander to pitch at any point in a 3-game series unless you have a huge lead in one of these games and you need to get him some postseason work. Because if you do win the 3-game series, I believe you're going to need him for the next 5-game series. And if you go beyond that, obviously you're going to want Justin Verlander available if you're going into an ALCS or if you're going into hopefully the World Series. But before we cross that bridge, let's just win the initial series. And I think if you want to do that, you cannot have Justin Verlander, not now, starting either game. He didn't look terrible in his last outing. I don't have the numbers right in front of me. I looked it up when I was doing research on this yesterday, but I don't have the numbers right in front of me. But it's still not enough to justify removing guys who have been pitching lights out, the guys who have gotten you to the point where you've overtaken the division and you are going to win it and you're getting into the postseason in the first place. So, Framber, Kikuchi, Brown or Blanco, and then if either of them struggle, once again, you bring in the guy who you didn't start. I don't want Arrighetti pitching in the postseason. As a matter of fact, I would bring in Verlander before I brought in Arrighetti. Arrighetti's just too inconsistent, and that's a guy you don't know what you're going to get in the playoffs, and I would definitely not bring him in unless you got a big lead somewhere or you're getting blown out and you need somebody to eat up some innings. So overall, the Astros are in a good spot, though. When we take a look at what they have left on the schedule, they have 2 more games versus the Angels. They should win both of those. And like I said, by that time, you've got 6 games left. Right now, you have a 5-game lead. that first 3 games versus Seattle, you should be closing them out. If you can beat them head to head within that first, I'm hoping by September 24th, the Astros are celebrating a wild card victory. And I mean, hell, try to win out the rest of the games. You do play Cleveland the last 3 games of the season. So if you can get them to lose a couple of games while you're beating up on LA and Seattle and then come in and play Cleveland, sweep that series. I mean, give yourself a shot to not have to play a first round wild card. But I think that's very unlikely that that's going to happen. So if I had to guess, I say the Astros start preparing themselves for a wild card 3-game series. And hopefully you're going into that with Fromber as your starter. And then once hopefully you can win that series in 2. But if you don't, hopefully you're going into the next series and you're able to get one of those 3, Fromber, Kikuchi, Brown, or Blanco, to start in your divisional series. Now, if you play 3 games in the wild card, and let's say Brown and Blanco both end up pitching significant innings, now maybe you do start a Justin Verlander in game 1 of a 5-game divisional series. I could see that happening. And listen, I'm not going to count Justin Verlander out. We know the amazing pitcher that he is. He's a Hall of Famer. He's a legend. He could very well be one of the best right-handed pitchers of all time. He's one of the best pitchers of all time, period. So maybe you get to the divisional series and then you think about game 1, Justin Verlander. That way you can give Fromber and Kikuchi a little bit more rest, especially if you had to go a 3-game series. Then you're going to need that for sure. So yeah, but I would say overall though, the state of the Houston Astros is good. State of the Houston Texans is good. As always, it's a great time to be a fan of either one of those teams. Really quick, let's do the state of the Houston Rockets. All right. Don't have a lot of Rockets news. They just recently bought out AJ Griffin Jr. or Adrian Griffin. I don't know if he's a junior or not. AJ Griffin, he's Adrian Griffin's son. I put out an article just a few days ago, that he was considering stepping away from basketball. That was a report from not The Athletic. Was it the Yeah, it was The Athletic. They had reported, it was Shams and Kelly Eco. They had both reported that AJ Griffin was considering stepping away from ball. Listen, AJ Griffin was unlikely to be a mainstay in the rotation of this team anyway. They did bring him on because of his ability to shoot the basketball, which is something that is much needed. But instead of waiting around for him to make a decision, I'm assuming maybe he is stepping away because the Rockets just decided to buy him out. And there is an article in the current today in the Dream Shake detailing that buyout. But there's also, just to show you how slow the news cycle for the Houston Rockets is, a couple of days ago, I wrote this article. It's entitled "The Top 5 Rockets Most Likely to Fill the Free Chicken Void Left by Boban's Departure." With Boban moving on to play pro ball in Turkey, the NBA will be searching for a new man of the people. Yeah, that's how slow the news cycle is. I will say the article I wrote before that was about Tari Eason, and another one of those make or break, actually 2 articles prior, because I did write the AJ Griffin article as well. But I was talking about how Tari Eason needed to step up this season. And one of the commenters was like, I'm really tired of the make or break narrative. The make or break narrative around the Rockets. Pretty much we know everybody on this team, this is a make or break season for them. And I told him I agree. I apologize. It's September. Training camp doesn't start till October 1st. Hopefully there's going to be a lot more to talk about, a lot more to write about at that time. And so my hope is that possibly I'll be going to Houston Rockets Media Day. Shout out to my editor, Darren Yvonne. Love you, bro. And I'll definitely have much more to write about. But in the meantime, You guys might be interested to know who I chose as the top 5 people who are most likely to win free chicken on the road for NBA fans. Leo G in the comments from YouTube says, how are the Houston soccer teams doing? Dynamo and Dash. You know what, Leo? That is a really good question. I was supposed to have Michael Duncan on this week to talk about the Houston Dynamo FC, and my schedule changed suddenly at work. Then all of a sudden, another podcast fell into my lap that I couldn't turn away. So I'm now doing 2 episodes of Twin Toros every week, 1 episode of Houston Sports State of the Union podcast every week, and I'm writing Houston Rockets articles for the Dream Shake. Hopefully, that is not me biting off more than I can chew. But, however, I have talked to Michael Duncan, and I told him I do want to maintain doing the Houston Dynamo segment because I'm interested in it. I love all my Houston teams. I just read an article recently that the NHL looks like it's getting ready to expand, and the top teams are the top cities that are going to have a bid for a new hockey team are Houston and Atlanta. I know Tillman Fertitta desperately wants to bring a hockey team here, and I hope that happens, man, because then I'll talk Houston hockey on the Houston Sports State of the Union podcast. I am a fan of all things H-Town. So I'm going to be honest with you, though, Leo. I don't know what's going on with the Dynamo now, but I'm going to get a hold of Mike again, and I'm going to see if next week he'll come on and we'll talk some Houston Dynamo. I don't know if you're being facetious or if you're really interested in the Dynamo, but I am all things H-Town, bro. So you're not gonna waver me from talking a little bit of Houston soccer. If that's what the people want, I'm gonna give it to them. So yeah, the State of the Union in Texas and Houston, not Texas, State of the Union in Houston is extremely strong, and it's a great time to do a Houston sports podcast. I'm blessed that I'm able to do 2 of them, and I'm blessed that so many of you guys are supporting. So to P. Scott, to Leo, I appreciate you guys being in the chat today. It doesn't look like I'm going to be giving away any free swag, at least not at the moment. But if you're watching this video after the live is over, please put your score prediction into the comments. Make sure you do it before the game starts. If you do it after the game starts, I'm going to know. It'll have a timestamp on it. But yeah, and if you correctly guess the score of the game, I will send you guys some free Houston Sports State of the Union swag. All right, guys, that's going to do it for the Houston Sports State of the Union podcast today. Really quick, I want to remind you once again of the ways you can continue to support this show. One of them you've been doing now for just over half an hour. Listen, watch, share with your friends, like, follow, subscribe, join the chat, comment. Any way you can consume the content, I am extremely grateful for you for doing so. And all I ask that you do is share with 5 people. Ask those 5 people to share with another 5. We'll have this thing taken over H-Town in no time. Speaking of taking over H-Town, once again, thank you all for supporting the Twin Toros podcast. Don't forget that podcast will be moving to ESPN Houston starting next week. Every Tuesday evening, we will be live premiering the episode, and myself and my partner Ruben will be in the chat talking to you guys while that show plays. Thank you guys so much for all of your support with that show as well, and with the Houston Sports State of the Union podcast. Once again, there's a QR code in the video, a link in the description for my tip jar. If you're interested in leaving me a tip, everything you leave me goes back into the show. And if you leave a donation of $50 or more, that is another way to get some free Houston Sports State of the Union podcast swag. Once again, I will have some affiliate links for Houston Sports fan gear. I'm going to put some of the fall gear in there, even though in Texas it's still hot as hell. But maybe there's some Texans fans, I don't know, living in Alaska somewhere who want to get a hoodie or a jacket. There'll also be some affiliate links for all of the equipment I use to bring you this fine podcast. If you're interested in buying podcast equipment, if you're interested in podcasting and you're wondering, hey, I wonder what Nick uses, well, I have links. I will have links to to all of those things in the description of this video as well. And if you choose to buy anything from my Amazon affiliate links, I will get a little bit of change from that. And that is another way to support me financially. And then once again, if you're interested in sponsoring the Houston Sports State of the Union podcast or the Twin Toros podcast, you can reach me at hsstateoftheunionpod@gmail.com. I would love to represent your business, and I would love to grow our businesses together. Leo G says Texans 24-17. I'm locking it in, buddy. You got 24-17. If you correctly guess the score, Leo, you're going to make sure that you get back in contact with me. I'll try to contact you either through the comments on YouTube, or if you want to email me at hsstateoftheunionpod@gmail.com. I will make sure you get a free t-shirt, hat, mug, tote bag, anything you want with the Houston Sports State of the Union podcast logo on it. I'll make sure you get it if you have correctly predicted the score of the Texans versus the Vikings. Guys, that is going to do it for the show this week. I thank you so much for tuning in. Next week's show will probably be on Saturday again, Friday or Saturday. I'll make sure I announce it to you. I got to figure out exactly what my schedule is going to be. But in the meantime, you know what I want you to do. I want you to stay 10 toes down for H-Town. I love you. We'll see you next time.
This has been the Houston Sports State of the Union podcast, hosted by Nick Stevenson. Tune in next week for more news and analysis of your favorite Houston teams. Please follow the show on Facebook, Instagram, the app formerly known as Twitter, if that's even really still a thing. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content.